Hi friends, Brianna here again, Manager of Theatrical and Early Childhood Experiences at Miami Children's Museum. On June 16th, Miami Children's Museum hosted Kids and Pride, an LGBTQ resource panel for families, educators and youth workers as part of our Rainbow Families Celebration Month.
My name is Donnie Piccolo and I'm a drag king and drag performer.
Today, what we are going to be reading is This Day in June by Gail E. Pittman, illustrated by Christina Litton.
I'm Jordan and I'm a trans woman, and today I'm going to be reading a very adorable story called Julian is a Mermaid by Jessica Love for the Miami Children's Museum's Rainbow Families Celebration.
Thank you so much, Miami Children's Museum, for allowing me to read Pink is for Boys for all of you watching this.
Now I'm tucked in nice and tight. Mommy and Mama kiss me goodnight.
There are lots of different ways to be a family. Your family is special, no matter what kind it is.
A rainbow flag is never done. There's always room for everyone.
Miami Children's Museum's Rainbow Families programming has been made possible from our friends at Nordstrom and our fund, an LGBTQ community foundation. Now, we recorded the panel that happened, and we hope that you at home can find this a helpful resource for you. The panel recording starts a few minutes into the actual event, so I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce first the panel members. So, here they are. Gabby Jimenez and Juliana Ruiz. Gabby is a 16-year-old trans woman recently coming out during the pandemic in April 2020, and she is joined by her incredibly supportive mother, Juliana Ruiz. Ellen Kahn. Ellen is the Senior Director in Programs and Partnerships at the Human Rights Campaign. In her role, Ellen provides national leadership and expertise in public education and advocacy efforts on behalf of LGBTQ youth and families. Morgan Mayfair. Morgan Mayfair is a trans man who is the co-founder and executive director of TransSOCIAL Inc. and the co-founder and co-chair of Trans Pride Fort Lauderdale, and is driven by his passion for building acceptance and equality for trans people in society. Katie Paff. Katie Paff is a member of the Human Rights Campaign Steering Committee for the South Florida chapter and gears their work towards LGBTQ youth. Johara Sanders. Youth advocate, bullying prevention expert, LGBTQ activist, a recipient of 2019 People's Luminary Award from SAVE, and the founder of nationally recognized bullying and suicide prevention organization, ENVY, which stands for National Voices for Equality, Education, and Enlightenment. Johara Sanders has dedicated the past 2 decades of her life to mentoring youth and families impacted by bullying and suicide. Schaffer Zaret. Schaffer Zaret is a trans activist, panel speaker, and development professional who values dedication and service to her community and collaboration. She is the Director of Development for Pridelines. Now that you have met the panelists, I'm going to throw over to the recording of the discussion. It cuts partway in to Gabby telling us her coming out story as a trans person. We hope that you find this panel and discussion helpful and educational, and just as important as we do here at Miami Children's Museum, as we continue to work together to make a more inclusive society for our children and our families.
And that kind of stayed in the back of my head for a long time. And with the quarantine, I had a lot of self-reflection and thinking about why she was in the back of my head for a long time. And it was just really it's really confusing trying to differentiate between identity and orientation. And that's something I struggled with. But the little, I guess, thing I had in the back of my head of Jazz Jennings, it was always there, basically. It was always in the back of my mind. And during a year ago, exactly, I came out as trans. And it's all because of Jazz, basically. Seeing representation in the media, and especially when you're young, is really important. And it's the reason I could discover I was trans.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same thing, Gabby, is that representation matters, right? In the popular media. That's part of the reason why, at the Children's Museum, we do Rainbow Families Month. We want every person that comes into our museum to either see themselves somehow, right? See their family somehow represented, or to show children that aren't like that there are people different from themselves. So thank you, Gabby, so much for sharing your story. Morgan, I was going to ask you to begin with, as a trans man, I'm going to bring you into the spotlight. Just some general protocol when speaking with, talking with, conversing with trans people. Sort of some do's and don'ts to do with pronouns, to do with them before being coming out and transitioning, and after, and referencing the dead name or not referencing the dead name. Just some general sort of do's and don'ts that could help our people present today.
Well, in reality, it's all about respect. You wouldn't want to disrespect anyone, and specifically a child. One of the things that Gabby mentioned, which really struck me, is that Gabby had that representation to be able to look at. Okay, I didn't. Okay, I came out as trans at 6, but there were no trans men for me to look up to. There was nothing. Anything that I could find was all about trans women. I didn't think trans men existed. So that was something that was very difficult for me, and maybe why it took me so long to actually transition. So I went through a lot of struggle in my life trying to understand who I was, because there was no one to look up to. There was no one there for me. Getting back to being respectful, never use someone's dead name. If they choose to share that with you, it's because they trust you tremendously. And that's something that you should not share with anyone else either. It's a one-on-one thing, and it's a gift when someone chooses to share that with you. It is all about respect. When it comes to pronouns, I always recommend that if you want to get the pronouns right, first share yours. Okay? As in, my name is Morgan, my pronouns are he, him. What's your name and what is your pronoun? Never say preferred pronouns, because it's not preferred, it's your pronoun.
Yeah.
And that's something to keep in mind.
That's the preferred pronoun is a really good tip, because I've sat on different conferences and met people that says my preferred pronoun is, but it is your pronoun. It's who you are, right? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And the dead name, it has, in my opinion, a bad connotation in being called a dead name. Mm-hmm. I don't have a problem specifically with the name my parents gave me at birth, okay? It doesn't suit me, it doesn't represent who I am, but to me, it's not a dead name, because she brought me to who I am today, okay? Mm-hmm. It was also one of my grandmother's name. I was named after my grandmother, and I loved my grandmother dearly. So to me, it's not a matter of disrespecting that. I prefer not to call it a dead name. I prefer to call it my birth name.
Mhm. That's a great, another little tidbit as well. Thank you, Morgan. And thank you, Gabby, once again. Ellen, I would like to just, I know you work on a national level with HRC. I would like to bring you into the conversation of just briefly bringing us all up to date with what is happening on a national level with LGBTQ youth at the moment. If you could sort of just gloss over that all that is happening right now.
Sure, I can do that. Well, I think just kind of pivoting from what Gabby shared and her journey to self-actualization, one of the things that is sort of very contemporary for our younger generation is, young people are becoming self-aware at younger ages than, say, Morgan and my generation. Partly it is because there's so much more representation. There's a lot of information online. Sometimes being online can be dangerous, but most often you can find really affirming, inclusive information and spaces as young queer and trans people. So you can sort of get information that you might not get from a parent or from a school nurse or elsewhere to help you understand the feelings you have, the thoughts you have, and move toward being more authentic. There's just been a ton of progress in terms of just general public opinion being more favorable. 85–90% of people say they know someone close to them who's LGB. About 60% now say they know someone who's trans. That's really doubled in the last 5 years. And the more people know who we are, have a friend who's LGBTQ, classmates, etc., it just, people change their, perceptions, their hearts and minds. And I think that's all really positive. There is sort of a flip side to that, which is coming out at younger ages. Often young people aren't equipped to deal with some of the bullying, some of the hostile responses, certainly family rejection. I mean, Gabby's mom, Juliana, I think that's how you introduced yourself. Like the fact that you're a supportive mom, I'm sure there are parts of this journey that are not easy and real clear for parents, but the fact that you're by your child's side is literally a life-saving response to who your child is. And not every child is lucky enough to have that. So coming out at younger ages frees a young person to be who they are, but they're not always accepted. And then they don't have the skills at age 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 or even 18 really to navigate what might be rejection from family, from peers, just mistreatment, generally speaking, the stigma that comes with being LGBTQ. So it's kind of the best and worst of times in a certain way. And then kind of layering over that, there's been a ton of anti-trans legislation. Florida is one of the states that really felt that. But about 25 states with conservative legislatures introduced legislation that would directly harm trans kids in particular, but broadly sends a very scary message to everyone in the LGBT community around the fact that we are really not equal. We're really not where we need to be. And so, there's a lot more work to do, and HRC and other organizations are, keeping our eye focused on full equality. The one other thing I'll say is that, for those of you who have programs and organizations that directly serve young people, more and more young people do self-identify as something other than cisgender, which means not, identifying with your assigned sex at birth. So trans, non-binary, genderqueer, gender expansive, and more and more young people are identifying as other than heterosexual. And so where maybe when I was going to Children's Museum as a 5-year-old, it was not even on anybody's radar that kids who are 5, 7, 9, 12 could even understand the concepts of sexual orientation, gender identity. We really do now. And so it is important, we'll talk a lot more about like setting kind of a tone, creating the kind of culture and climate within your organizations and programs that recognizes the true diversity. So I think, one last thing, I promise I'll stop after this. With all the progress we've made, just harping back for a second to the fact that young people still face rejection, still face bullying, still have internalized shame and stigma because they've had negative messages thrown at them, or they simply don't understand how to be other than what they've been told they should be. Sometimes young people are really struggling with fear and worry, anxiety, depression, sadness. And we do see this in research that it's not that LGBTQ youth are, wired to have worse mental health. It's that we're not treated with respect and inclusion. We don't feel safe in a lot of spaces. And that's what affects our mental health. And so again, everything you're doing to send messages, the language you use, the policies you have, all of that really can have either a direct positive response on young people like Gabby, or it can have a direct negative response.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing. So much going on, right now on a national level. I want to touch on you talking about, the bullying and Johara, I would love for you to speak just a little bit about your organization and what you do, because specifically your organization is not LGBTQ. It is a anti-bullying organization with a arm of it or a wing of it being for LGBTQ youth. And I should say, Johara was also pretty instrumental, from what I understand, in Gabby's coming out last year. So if you could just talk about a little bit about your organization and the wing of it, that is the LGBTQ.
Yes, so as a queer woman, I came out I won't say very young, I would say as a teenager in Miami. And it was definitely in a multicultural environment, or really a mainly Black school. And it was definitely not accepted, especially there were a lot of Caribbean families there. And the implication was, you're going to hell, right? That's it, you're going to hell. And our job is to save your soul so that at least maybe there's a chance for you. But if you keep on this path, you're going to hell. And so that was the messaging that I always got, to the point where I actually would joke and go like, wow, okay, well, at least people like me will be in hell then. At least I'll finally meet somebody like me. And when I got, going through trauma, when I got older, I realized that I never wanted to have another young person feel the way that I felt at that age. And I want parents to pay attention to those warning signs. I was always running away. I was always hiding things. Everything was, teenagers are secretive, but I feel like I was extra secretive with things because there was this fear of coming out. Even if there was this fear of hell, there was this fear of if someone knows, and then you become the target at school. And sometimes being the target of LGBT bullying comes with physical aggression. It's not just the teasing of, it's not your mama jokes. Now we just had a case here not too far from us in Broward County where a child, a middle schooler, 8th grade, I believe 13 or 14 years old, was slammed on her face. I believe it made national news. Some of you may know about it, a Black youth. That is not the first time we've had an issue with youth at that school being violently harmed for several reasons. And so it's very dangerous we know very early on as LGBT people, that it's very dangerous to come out. So when people are like, oh, it's Pride, come out, I'm one of the first people to be like, hold up, don't be rushing people to come out, because you don't know their home environment, you don't know their school environment, you have no idea what's going on. What you should do is focus on finding out if they have someone in their life that can support them and that they can talk to in privacy or in public, if there's a support group that they can go to? Is there a community that they can find on their own, sometimes even without their parents knowing? You know, when I was first talking to Gabby, it was through text messages. I mean, her mother knew that something was wrong or something was like different because of the way she was acting, and was always saying, like she could tell something wasn't okay with her. And she just told her, whatever it is, you know, you have Jahara in your life. Whatever you want to talk to her about, I'm sure she'll be the one to for you to go to. And we text for a while before she came out to her mom. The importance is putting people in your children's life that can support them when they need it. That is what can save their life. And many people just don't have, like Morgan said, many people just don't have that representation. They don't know who to go to. And so with our organization, one of the things that was important to me was, here I am, a Black queer, woman who has the gift of gab and who has resources, and I live in South Florida, and who says that I can't start an organization that's going to support youth? Because youth were dying by suicide in record numbers, LGBT youth particularly, up in around 2008, 2009, 2010. I mean, just look up the cases. Tyler Clementi. I mean, there's way too many to even account for. So I started this organization as a queer woman, knowing this will not be an LGBT organization, because I'm going to tell the truth. There are many times that I would talk to my own friends and they would not be okay with me wearing a rainbow shirt. I was the one that when I was out. I had rainbow stickers on my car. It was like, I wanted to let everybody know you were going to be represented in me, And so friends would tell me, like, don't park your car this way, just so many of the adults around me, even though I was an adult, were not as accepting. So I was really put it in overdrive. And when I started the organization, I knew that as going into schools, we were not going to be as accepted if I started this as an LGBT organization. So honestly, I started it as an organization that was just about bullying and suicide prevention. Didn't let them know that when we got there, we were going to talk about LGBT bullying. They sort of got it right there, like on the spot, because you cannot have us come in and talk about cyber bullying, girl to girl bullying, social alienation, and then think I'm racial and ethnic bullying, and then think I'm going to skip over LGBT bullying. I'll tell you the truth. In locally, there were a couple of schools that we were asked out of because we brought trans youth speakers. And they said, we do not want this at our school. And so they canceled our contracts. And I just made everyone aware, don't send your kids to that school. So when I say that I am a very loud and proud and out activist for this community, it is because I understand what's on the line. Lives are on the line. And I attempted suicide twice as a teenager. I deal with depression and anxiety. Let's talk about the mental health. We don't even want, where's that conversation about the things that's going on with our LGBT youth? And so I know what is at stake and what's on the line, especially for minority youth, especially for youth of color. And it's another reason why I fight to participate in things when I don't see people of color represented. Mm-hmm. It is, wait a minute, we are not about to have a conversation on rainbow families, LGBT youth, on whatever it is, and not have representation of Black communities. Because the fact of the matter is, Black trans women, the average life expectancy is 35 years old. Black trans kids, they don't get to grow up and live long-term lives. So so our organization, again, as I'm going off on a tangent, we are not an LGBT organization, but I would say like 6 of our founding board members are members of the LGBT community. We We're funded by the Miami Foundation with a grant to do our work with LGBT youth. Most of the youth that participate in our leadership programs are LGBT youth. We work very closely with SunServe in Broward County. We have resources for over the pandemic. We've paid rent, phone bills, therapy. I cannot tell you the amount of therapy bills that we have paid for LGBT youth, including getting them transportation to therapy. And even though it was in a pandemic, for many of them, just getting out of their homes to go to therapy for that 1 hour a week was a big deal.
Yeah, I can imagine. So yeah, it's incredible, Jahara, the kind of work your organization does. And I have put your link in the chat, your website link, and we'll also have it in follow-up material as well. Schaffer, I wanted to bring you into the conversation because you also are part of a different organization called Pridelines. And if you could just briefly tell us a little bit about your organization, and then let's get into some questions after that. Schaffer.
Sure. So I proudly serve as the Director of Development for Pridelines. We are an LGBTQ plus community center and direct service agency in Miami. And our goal ultimately is to be a voice for the community, to hold space for and create space for people to come together, for people to feel safe, affirmed, and loved. And we do that in a number of ways. We do serve the entire community. So it is LGBTQ plus youth, adults, and our allies of the community. And through programs like Project Safe, where we help connect LGBTQ plus youth who are experiencing homelessness to shelter. And as a drop-in center, it's been hard during the pandemic. Things have definitely changed for how we serve the community, but our mission and resolve to fight for and be representatives of and a voice of the community has unwavered. And I think in this work, what's so important is to really hear the voices of the community, because if you're not taking those voices and helping it inform the work that you do, then you're not doing the work. It's really, really important when you serve the community to help amplify those voices and ask yourself, what does the community want? What does the community need? What are we hearing out there on the ground? What are we making sure that we're doing for the community? And so for me professionally, it's really amazing to hear Gabby's story, because I too came out as trans during the pandemic, but I'm 18 years older than Gabby. So as a 34-year-old person, I'm sure there's a lot that connects us as far as our lived experience and just the things and challenges we face. Representation for me was ultimately non-existent growing up. Even as a millennial, even as someone who saw kind of the progression and age of the internet, it just wasn't there for me. And so safe spaces and affirming spaces are crucial. And unfortunately for me, that wasn't really that common either. In school, bullying and just name calling, there wasn't a lot of training and education and capacity building for educators to really tackle some of these things head on. So I grew up in fear. I grew up really just locking away who I knew I was, but didn't have the words to express. And what's interesting is a lot of these resources did exist in the community, even as I was growing up. But my world, and this is where I think the challenge comes into place with a lot of the youth that are going through what they are, is that sometimes there are great organizations, there are great resources in the community, but as we go through it, as we live our lives and we have our bubble and school and family, it's really why representation, voices, as we build capacity in the community to support really vital programming like we're seeing my colleagues on the panel are talking about, that's why that's so important. And so, I think what the pandemic allowed me to do was to slow down, to really understand that, in Gabby's words, something that was off about me too. And even as a 34-year-old person from a loving, safe, supportive family, it can still take decades to just be comfortable and supported and affirmed. And I see folks like me out in the community all the time. So I just think too that, you know, there is a lot of commonality in our stories. There are differences in our lived experiences. Our process might look different. We might look different. How we present might be different or the same. But I'm grateful every day that I get to go to work, and that while we honor pronouns and we talk about them at every meeting and when we introduce ourselves, I, literally transitioned into a job where I could be safe. I felt supported by my colleagues in the community. And ultimately, as we start to see the pandemic changing and vaccination rates going up and just people out there doing their thing again, I think it is important to acknowledge the mental health impacts and what this period of time has meant to many in the community. But again, to mirror some of what Morgan said as well, respect is so important. I'll just say briefly, in my experience, at 34, testosterone had already done its thing. I had already lost all my hair pretty much. So I had to face a lot of things as an adult person coming out, and the world kind of saying like, who are you? What are you? What's going on? Like, are you, aren't you? So it's been painful in some ways. People can be very cruel. Curiosity can be masked by really disgusting behavior. And so, do I want to sit at a restaurant and have the table next to me taking out their cell phones and taking pictures of me? I don't. Or in the store, getting looks and gawked at by people? I don't, but I am committed to my visibility. I'm committed to the safety of my community. And so if that's what I bear the brunt of for folks that are either have not come out yet and not been able to live their truth in all aspects of their life, that is where the conversation continues. And that's where the work and changing hearts and minds and opening people up to that, where it's not about our differences necessarily. It's about, we can find shared humanity and shared experience, even if we think we're on different planets. And so I'm committed to that in my work. I know where I work is committed to that as well. And I know everyone on this panel and those of you watching have curiosity about it, are committed to it as well, and incorporating that into your everyday work. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Schaffer, and thank you for sharing your story with us. Katie, I see that you have your hand up. Is there something you wanted to add to the conversation before we move on to questions?
Yes, I just wanted to add, like, one of the biggest things for youth who do come out, especially if you are not like a relative, like let's say you're a teacher or school staff, that it takes a lot to come out and to just be like in a space where you may not know everything, but just know that that person is trusting you with something so big, and that shows how much respect they have for you. So it's very important to be like upfront, be like, hey, I don't know much about this, but I do support you, and just know you have your safe space in me. And and different programs are amazing. They're evolving. Like, I have a big sibling through Big Brothers Big Sisters of Broward and their Big Pride program. So that's another thing, is when someone comes out to you, especially a youth, try and help them get into resources if they need it, and just make sure you check in with them often, because suicide rates are really high. LGBTQ youth are about 2 to 3 times more likely to attempt or commit suicide, and let alone transgender youth are about 5 to 6 times more likely to attempt or commit suicide. So just know that when someone comes out to you, that's showing how much trust they have with you. So it's just important to be honest with them, even if you're not sure what to do or how to help. Just let them know at least you're there, so that way they don't feel like they're trapped in their own world. Because I got to that point too, where I even had severe thoughts of suicide because of just being bullied and everything happening at my own school. But then once I got into the GSA at my school and just got into all these different programs like SunServe, I actively get therapy over there. I don't know if I would be alive without these programs. So it's very important to be there for youth. And it literally can just take one person to save someone's life with this. And that has happened. A teacher at my school who was the GSA coordinator, I trusted her with what was going on, and she got me into the resources I needed. And that's how I'm where I'm at today. Was all because of one person showing me that they cared about me.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie, for sharing that. And that's great advice on the personal level to be there. Morgan, I see your hand up, so I'm going to bring you into the conversation. Morgan.
Well, what I wanted to say is that, yes, you know, when someone comes out to you, regardless of their age, they are trusting you. And I would recommend that that person educate themselves about the community.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sometimes parents are frightened when their child tells them that they're LGBTQ. And I understand that, because you worry about your children and you see this world that is not accepting. You know, you hear us talking about the rates of suicide, and that's something that strikes fear in any parent's heart. You know, I don't have any biological children, but I do have a lot of trans children, a lot of children that have slept on my couch and lived in my house. I have a family that we call the House of Mayfaire, and I have 58, members of that family. And we are a chosen family, but those are children that were not accepted by their biological families. And I believe that, you know, parents inherently love their children, and it is fear that sometimes makes them react the way they do. Educating yourself about the community is extremely important. Don't go by what your church is telling you, or I'm Latino. So, you know, the cultural background also brings in a lot of things that sometimes are negative. Hold on to the love of your child and educate yourself, not only about the resources that are available to help your child, but also the history of the LGBTQ community. And I don't mean just the political history, but an understanding of the fact that, for instance, trans folks, we're not anything new. We have existed from the beginning of time. There are cave drawings that depict trans people. In Native American history, we have existed, and we were actually honored as two-spirit people. There are more than two genders, folks. You need to understand this. We have been sold a reality that is not true, okay? And when we stick to that, we alienate our children and we push them out into a world that it can be very dangerous. And I know that most parents love their children, okay? I would say that all do. But unfortunately, some of the cultures that we have around us make us believe that we own our children. We don't. Children are something that we set out into the world and we help mold and we help guide, but they don't belong to us, okay? They are gifts from the universe that go out there to change the world. And we need to see it that way. It's up to us to guide them, not own them. So educate yourself so that you have the information to be able to guide them and protect them in the best way possible.
Thank you, Morgan. Ellen, I see your hand raised, and then I would love to hear Juliana from you as a parent and your initial reactions and the progress that you have made as a parent as well over the past year. Ellen.
Feel free to do that first, since we haven't heard from Juliana. And
okay. All right, thank you, Ellen. Juliana.
Hi. All right. So as Gabby mentioned, she came out about a year ago during the pandemic. And as Jahara mentioned, I had already known that something was off. My daughter was very going through some tough emotional times, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I was able to direct her to someone that provided support, and I'm super thankful. I mean, Jahara has been instrumental for Gabby during this entire process. And I mean, as a parent, yeah, Morgan, you're I mean, right on point with everything you said. And you have all these emotions. You know, at first when I knew that Gabby and Jahara was talking, I was like, all right, at least Gabby's doing better. She felt she was acting a little better. She wasn't as sad. And I felt like, okay, so we're making progress. And I didn't know what to expect. Since Gabby was a child, her father and I always expected something. You know, she liked playing with dolls. She liked dressing up in her sister's clothing. She liked wearing nail polish. Gabby was in elementary school and middle school and was wearing nail polish to school all the time. I'm Latin, her father's Latin, we're all Latin. And I mean, you can imagine the Latin grandmothers. And she didn't care. She would wear her nail polish to the point that I think we had 1 or 2 teachers send her home or write us about it. And we said, no, I mean, why can the girls wear nail polish? Why can't Gabby wear nail polish? And so this was way before she came out. I mean, this was 3-4 years ago that this was happening. And she always loved her nail polish. She eventually started getting acrylics or the long nails that she loved. And she had not yet come out at this point. So here I have my son wearing acrylic nails or wearing nail polish. And I'm thinking, I don't know where this is going. So she did come out when she finally came out last year in a PowerPoint. It was a very, very creative PowerPoint that she put together for her sisters and I with a little riddle at the end that said, what did it say? Gabby isn't.
I'm not. So the riddle led to everyone thinking I was coming out as gay. And I said, I'm not gay. I'm trans, basically.
Yeah.
To throw them off.
Yeah, so it was like it was a PowerPoint with a little, I guess, riddle at the end. But that is how she came out, and it was a shock, to say the least, when she came out. I had expected Gabby to be gay. I did not expect her to be trans. And when she came out, I think for me, the fear set in, you know, the fear that you guys have mentioned. You have so much fear as a parent for your child, for everything they're going to face in their life, because it's going to be hard. Schaffer, what you were saying is everything that like is in my nightmares about my daughter. So it was scary, but at the same time, I was like, all right, we have to take action. Gabby was 15 at the time, and she was in the process of starting puberty. So there was timeliness to everything that we had to do. And you know, since then, her father and I have been 100% supportive. Her sisters are really supportive. I mean, her sisters immediately picked up on it. Gabby's got a 14 and a 13-year-old sister, and they picked up on the pronouns immediately. For me, it was a struggle. Sometimes I still slip up now, a year later. I know her dad is also going through the same, but for the most part, she has received nothing but support from her family. I don't know, Gabby, if you would say otherwise, but she's been very fortunate in that sense. And as parents, we're very much dedicated to making sure that not only that she feels supported and that she feels that she's never alone, but that she can also be a voice. I mean, that's why she's participating today. She can be a voice for the many kids, that the parents that are listening today, or the kids that don't know what to do or what they're going through. You know, Gabby really wants to be that voice.
And I could imagine for you, Juliana, a huge, as Morgan was saying, educate yourself, right?
Yeah.
I could imagine your learning curve just went like, whoosh,
yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, yeah, I went from, every June being like, okay, yay, it's Pride. Now it's our month here in the house. And now apparently Gabby says I have to start buying her presents because it's, I don't know about
that. That is a great idea. I've never thought of that.
I don't know if that's true, but she said I have to start getting her presents because it's her month. So, but yeah, it's a lot of learning. You're right. It's a lot of understanding. It's my community now too, you know?
Yeah. That's a very, very positive story to hear, and that, you know, that's why you're here with us to share that and be an example, both of you, fellow families or trans people, trans teens out there. Ellen, your hand.
Yeah, I had looked earlier through some of the questions that your attendees put in ahead of time, and I was just thinking, listening to the really powerful personal stories so many of us are sharing, that as a mom of kids who are now in their 20s, I can reflect back to taking them to children's museums, and that was something we did usually, during the times they were like from about 3 years old to maybe 9 or 10 years old. And I think a lot of children's museums programming is sort of aimed at folks, kids in that sort of K-5, maybe to some extent middle school. And so I'm just thinking from the perspective of some of your listeners that while they're really drawn to your stories and really learning a lot about what LGBTQ youth are carrying every day, trying to navigate life, that a lot of the younger people coming into the museums are not, they're not self-identified necessarily at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. But I think many of us can think back to, we're taking in the world around us. So whether we are going to grow up to be part of the LGBT community, or we're going to grow up to be going to school with LGBTQ kids and going to work with LGBTQ kids and being neighbors, I think the sort of work of folks who are leading children's museum programming, as well as those doing any kind of work with younger kids, is
in schools as well. The
yeah, in
classroom,
schools,
right?
Yeah, we do a lot of work with K-5 schools, and our program Welcoming Schools, which has its own website, which is very simply welcomingschools.org. It's not necessarily that your visitors are, coming in and, talking about their, being LGBTQ, but they're assessing the world around them. You heard folks talk about what they heard at church on this call. You heard folks talk about what they heard their families say, their parents say. So what are they hearing at the children's museums? Is it going to be a place that's nurturing and, like, from early on feels like a place they want to go when their parent says, hey, we're going to go to the museum or whatever? Or is it just one more place where it doesn't feel like anyone sees or hears or understands who they are? And so that's just, I would say, thinking about in the video you showed earlier, Brianna, with folks reading books, so much of what we can do with younger kids to help them understand the diverse world around them is through literature and, questions and prompts and lesson plans that are kind of built around some of these books, that, where you can have conversations, you can get kids to think creatively and outside the box about what a boy can wear and what a girl can do and who can raise children together. As a lesbian mom, that was definitely one of the concerns I had, as a parent of young children, is like, are my kids going to go to a school or go to an after school program or to a summer camp or a children's museum program and be the only kid whose family doesn't seem to be even represented in a way? Like, if everything's mom, dad, like a ton of families don't have a mom, dad in the home every day. Some families have one parent, some have a 2 mom, 2 dad family, some have grandparents who are heading the family, or multi-generational families. So just getting out of some of the habits of, who you're talking about when you say, who's welcome in your museum. What kind of language do you have on your website, on your forms? When kids are registering for programs, whether it's a summer camp or a one-day program, is there room for young people to tell you who's in their family, or for the parents to tell you who they are? Do you use this sort of new best practice with pronouns and have staff badges where everybody has their pronoun? And that's a learning opportunity. Why do you have your pronoun on your badge? And then you educate people about why that's important. And not everybody, we don't know what someone's gender identity is from looking at them. And this way we try to do our best to respect who people are. So I think there are a lot of best practices. And the reason I brought this up is because I think it's really hard to hear us talk about mental health and suicide and all those kinds of things that are not necessarily things that folks in a children's museum setting can feel know what to do about, or can
exactly, that it's
fix or
tangible
solve,
for
right?
them,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Right. Right.
I want to keep, because you had mentioned about the culture and the climate, right? Of you know, the public space, the institution, the classroom, the school, is so important. And I would like us all to sort of, if there are other best practices to throw out there. You know, we have a lot of youth workers and educators here, and children's museum workers. So Johara, I see your hand, and then I see Katie's hand. And if anybody else wants to add any best practices, that would be amazing. So Johara, take it away.
Yeah, so thank you. Ellen sort of like right after I raised my hand started saying all of the things that I was going to say, which I just want to emphasize then that language matters, right? We probably have a lot of people in leadership on this call at their museum or at their workplace. And so when you have people, when you train your staff to come in and talk about the youth who are coming in your doors, do you say, hi, boys and girls? You know, that's something very simple that you can change, because just saying boys and girls limits a lot of the in-between, right? So you can just, I mean, I love a hey y'all. I know that like people are like, oh, that's because you're from Mississippi and country. And I'm like, well, it's definitely inclusive. So figure out your version of hey y'all. Pronoun stickers, like Ellen talked about. Even if you have your pronouns on your badges for your workers, do you have pronoun stickers that you can give youth when they get to your museum? I'll tell you, one of the things that I forgot to mention was that our organization, we have a leadership program that Gabby's actually a part of this leadership program. And we're hopefully going to be training her to be one of the leaders soon. I don't know, fingers crossed. And so one of the things that youth do when their parents drop them off for this overnight 7-day leadership camp, they come in with us with their names on their name badge. And then when the parents go, we're like, all right, rip your name badges up, because you see them, they're now like, can I get a different sticker? Because that's not that's not the name that I really want to go by. That's not the pronoun. You know, just offering them a pronoun sticker could seem like, oh my God, why are we investing money in this? This is not a big deal. Their parents aren't there with them for that day. If they're there with the school, it could feel like this badge of like pride that they get to wear this little sticker and then they take it off when they leave. I don't know, but who knows? So I think little pronoun stickers are amazing. And if you do, please support trans, non-binary, and LGBT organizations on Etsy or wherever when you buy these things. You know, if you're gonna try to spend money in that community. Your bathroom signs. What do your bathroom signs say? What is your bathroom policy? Because that is a big deal. If someone comes to your museum, whether they're a worker or a youth or whatever, participant, donor, wouldn't it be great if those bathroom signs were more inclusive? And as Ellen said, train your staff. And I'm a proponent of, you either get on board or you like get off the board. Because again, I know this is a museum and we're not talking about suicide, but the way that you treat these children here is the way I bet you treat them in the streets, is the way you treat them at home. And so if you cannot be aligned with our values, if you're in a place of leadership, it is up to you to decide, can I train, is this person trainable? Are they coachable? You know, it takes a while, as Juliana said, to get those pronouns down. We're not talking about that. We're talking about if you are just refusing to see people, whether they're your employees or not, if you refuse to see those youth and you're smirking and you hear things, listen, I would have them out the door, because you are not going to be the reason that someone doesn't feel included in this space, not today.
Thank you, Johara. And I think what's important about, you know, you said maybe in the young demographic that we deal with at the museum and many other people, we're not necessarily talking about youth suicide yet, hopefully at that age, but we can set foundations, right, at this level. We can show acceptance and inclusivity and pride and all of this. And it's like you said, literature. I'm the biggest fan of, like, fill your bookshelves. Parents, if there are parents out there of young kids, museum people doing the story times daily, weekly, fill your bookshelves full of diversity, intersectionality, fill them, because the more kids at this age are seeing people that are like themselves or unlike themselves, the better it's going to be at the later stages in life. Katie, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that, like, especially for like school settings, like if you're talking about a story, instead of just saying, boys and girls, you could be, like just really like inclusive, like the hey, y'all, all of that. Or if you're gonna use pronouns, do like he, she, they, or do like he, she, add whatever you want, or do something where people can still use their general pronouns if they want, but make the space and make the room for them to be like, oh wait, no, I actually don't go by he, him, I go by they, them. Like, just make the space where if they want to correct you, that is a safe and affirming space, and that they don't have to be like, is it okay if I say what my preference is? And I wanted to touch on camp for a quick second. The way I actually found out I was non-binary was I attended a summer camp with Camp Lightbulb. They are an LGBTQ plus summer camp, like one of the first summer camps for the community in the nation. And it's run out of Provincetown. They also have some in Los Angeles and New York. And I went for a full week over the summer, and that's how I found out I was non-binary, because yeah, we did the normal camp activities of campfires, going whale watching, walking around town, but we also had the times where we had an older couple, gay couple, come in and talk to us and have dinner with us and talk and hang out. And we also had the spaces during camp where we're like, okay, this hour and a half is dedicated to talking about whatever you want, nothing is off limits, ask your questions. That's what it also was. And they also told us from day one that if we were out in town and we were not happy with the bathroom situation, they will go through whatever they need to make sure we feel safe using the bathroom. So if we need a gender neutral bathroom, they will bring it up, and they will not let you sit there needing the bathroom but not feeling safe. They said, we will do whatever we need to do to help you with that. Speak up. So that's another thing. And I want to point, actually, Camp Lightbulb is currently doing virtual camps. So we have people from Canada. We even had some people from, I think, the UK even. And they're doing a pay what you can rate. They say, here's a suggested amount we say to kind of go off of, but really, we don't want to limit you. So if you can't pay that, no worries. They're making sure people have the space, and we do all sorts of different things from, playing video games together to having LGBTQ plus people coming in and talking to us, like a comedian, Margaret Cho. We had a private Q&A with her like 2 weekends ago to talk to her about her own life, ask her questions. Nothing was off limits. And we had 45 minutes with her. So again, just find those resources and use them and talk about it. Yeah. And just make the spaces to let people be who they want to be, and let them know that, hey, if you are not this, it's okay. Like, you can put your preference out here. You don't have to, but you can. Mm-hmm. So just making that space is a big deal.
Thank you. And we'll put Camp Lightbulb information as well. There's one thing I do want to touch on that Ellen said about forms. It's so important. I feel like in schools, museums, there's forms to fill out, membership forms, camp forms, like enrollment forms, all of this, and just thinking them through. Is this inclusive? You know, do you have to have check boxes, or could you just say gender and fill in the blank? Parents or caregivers, you don't need a mom and a dad section, you know, it could be just a section, right? I think that's really important. Morgan, you have your hand raised, and then Johara.
So I want to address the bathroom situation. Okay. Just restroom. Okay. And list whether there are stalls and how many urinals or stalls are in each one. It's as simple as that. People make this huge big deal about the restroom. So in your home, do you have gendered restrooms? No. You have one restroom that company uses regardless. Your aunt, your uncle, your mother, your father, your son, your daughter, you all use the restroom, okay? It's not a big deal. You know, it's blown out of proportion so that they can use it against specifically the trans community. And no trans person, and this is big to say no trans person has ever assaulted anyone in the restroom. It's trans folks that get assaulted in the restroom, okay, by bigots. So what you need to do is just list restroom, how many stalls, how many urinals, and that's it.
And if it has a change table.
Yes.
Which is helpful. If yeah.
Very important.
Mm-hmm.
And wash your hands.
And then wash your hands. Lift the seat up if you need to lift the seat up. Thank you, Morgan. A very, like, just breaking it down so simply. Does it have to be so complex? No, just put the facts there, right? Yeah. Johara, and then I have another pre-registered question that a few people asked I'd like to address to the panel. So Johara.
Okay, so I just want to plug here our leadership program. It's called the Peace Ambassador Leadership Program. And this program, for one, the biggest thing is we have a 100% college acceptance rate for, and that includes, they may not go to college, but they definitely have been accepted into colleges and universities. We've had it since 2014. And we are virtual right now, and with one day in person at our local university. And this program teaches life skills, those things that they do not get in schools: life skills, leadership, public speaking, personal development, team building. And we've graduated, we're at FIU, University of Central Florida in Orlando. And we were about to move to Georgetown University in DC before the pandemic, but that's our next move. And so this program is something that I can say youth talk about how it saves their lives and how it gives them hope, and they wait year round for it. There's usually a waiting list. We cut it off at about 130 youth that participate. This year, we're only having about 60 because there's only so much you can do online before youth are just not into it anymore. But anyway, I wanted to inform you all about it, because the great thing about being online right now and about, unfortunately, this pandemic is programs that you would not usually have access to, you do have access to those programs now, and to see if you would like to participate at another time. So again, we can put
yeah, just also, sorry, Johara, answers the question that just popped up of other organizations that do virtual stuff or in other regions, right? That you said, like, one of the things of the pandemic is a wide reach that can happen from what's a local organization anymore? I don't know.
Right. Before we never thought that we thought we had to go there, which is why we started having the program at different universities. And now we're like, what made us think that we could not do this virtually? Are you kidding me? And you don't get everything. You don't get that personal, because really one of the things that I'll tell you that we teach our kids to do is learn how to make friends. These kids don't know how to make friends. And even when they graduate high school, some of our college students are now saying, oh my God, I'm not gonna know how to make friends. I don't know how to talk to people anymore. I don't know how to socialize. And that was pre-pandemic. Now they're like hermits. So to answer your question, can they participate virtually? Right now, we have more out-of-state youth registered than local. So
Wow, that's
absolutely,
great.
they can participate virtually in this program. And I'll put the link below.
Thank you, Jahara. Now, a question that came up a couple of times, and it's a tricky one, I think, to navigate. Not the question, but how to approach this situation. Of, you know, many people here are working in spaces for the general public. You know, the students, the people walking into a museum or organization. And if you're doing either, like we are right now, we're doing targeted programming, right, for rainbow families, or it's just part of your general programming. How do you handle firstly a youth or a grown-up that isn't on board with what you're saying, with what you're presenting, to a classroom, to the people at your story time, to the people sitting down to your science activity in the middle of a gallery? How do you handle either, you know, sometimes with kids, it's not intentional. And sometimes it is, you know, but I think with young kids, a lot of the time it's not intentional for them to not understand. But often with parents, it can be intentional that they don't believe in this. What is this? So a question for the panel. Ellen, I see your hand. Go for it.
Sure. I think this is a great opportunity to kind of go back to some of the basic building blocks for an LGBTQ inclusive organization, museum, school, whatever setting you're in. And we do a ton of work with, you know, big school districts and big child welfare organizations and big corporations. And there's kind of an approach that, you know, I could just very simply describe as a top-down approach, in that you have to have the commitment of leadership that your organization, your museum, your school is committed to being a welcoming, inclusive space. And so it starts with your written policies, your mission statement, your strategic priorities. Everything should reflect that you are creating a space that welcomes everyone. And that's across race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, ability, all those things that often leave, you know, where we keep tripping up and people keep being left out or mistreated. And so if you have that commitment from your board of directors, your CEO, your president, your program directors, then ideally it flows down. So to Johara's point, and a point some of us made, training, you know, when you hire people, you say, our organization has these values. And tell me a little bit about any work you've done with the LGBT community, or how do you think you'd fit in here in an organization that has this commitment? The same way you would do, for me, in my opinion, around working with any diverse community. You have to know who you're bringing in to your staff, what counselors you're hiring for your summer camp. And then you provide training, not just once, but ongoing. And that you also have sort of the tools and tips so that if you are leading a museum program and a kid says something like, oh, that's so gay, you actually have learned how to make that a teachable moment, what to say, what did you mean by that? Do you know what the word gay means? That can be hurtful when you say it as a put down. Like, most adults actually want to do the right thing and have never been trained or taught to do it. You ask elementary school teachers, they don't know what they can or should say when they hear some of this stuff. So if you have that top-down approach, you know that if a parent is pushing back on a book you're reading, or the fact that you have a rainbow flag hanging, that the whole entity has your back, that you're not operating as some kind of, renegade here.
Standalone, yeah.
Yeah, like, you didn't read this book without checking with the boss. Like, it's part of the culture, it's part of your mission. And so you feel more confident in doing that, being able to say, well,
and empowered, right?
Yeah,
empowered.
Yeah. This is the policy of our museum. Everyone is welcome. You can direct the person to bring their grievance somewhere else, but I think the other piece, and I say this so many times, is, if someone really doesn't like that, they can stop their patronage, because you are on the right side of history and doing the right thing. And you know, for every patron you lose, 5 more will come in because they want this kind of experience for their family. And so whether it's LGBTQ headed families, whether it's parents like many of you listening who just want to be more inclusive and raise your kids in an inclusive space. I mean, there are just some people who it doesn't matter what you're going to say. They
Exactly.
have so much, you know, they have so much bias. It's like hanging a Black Lives Matter banner, you know, someone doesn't like it, it's too bad. This is where we stand as an organization. So you can go give someone else your business, but 10 more people are going to come to you because they also believe that Black Lives Matter. So you have to dig in on your principles and stand by them.
Yeah, and that's excellent. Katie, I see your hand. I want to touch on something, Ellen, that I learned actually at a a conference for disability and the arts. And one thing came up in conversation is the policy of a performing arts organization was to remove the complainer, right? They were complaining about a child with autism making too much noise. The same thing here, right? The complainer is the problem, not the kid, not the story, not the 2 mums over there or the 2 dads. It's the complainer, right? And if they have a problem with something that is, you know, part of your policy, part of your culture, like you said, part of the climate of your school, your museum, your institution, then, you know, do you want them there? Do you want them to ruin your culture and your environment? No, you know, so exactly what you said, to have the language of your policies, of your mission statement from the museum in the back of your head, to be say, we are here for all families, all children. And that's a simple line, right? And so if you don't, if you have a problem with that, then you can step outside, or, you know, we'll follow up later and say goodbye and give you your money back and see you later, and keep going to the parking lot. Off you go. Katie, and then Morgan.
Yeah, something I wanted to add more on the younger people, you know, who may not understand all of the gender identity stuff. There's still a way to have them learn. So instead of telling them like, oh, this person is transgender, and then have them saying what does transgender mean, break it down and be like, oh, this person was born male, but they don't see themselves as male, and they see themselves more female, and they don't go by this anymore. And it's okay that they are different. It's okay that they don't align with this, and just break it down to the age range. So like I heard Gabby talking about Jazz Jennings. I heard part of her story was when she was 3 years old. Of course, a 3-year-old is not going to know what transgender is, but she literally made it into her terms of saying, I am a girl trapped in the boy's body. So literally, when you're having those younger kids interact and you see that they're not sure what's going on, just break it down and be like, yes, there is, people are a boy or you're a girl, but there's also an in between where you can be both. Like, break it down to their level. So really, anybody at any age can learn about the community. The thing is, you just need to tailor it to how they learn and their age area to gear it towards what they can understand.
Yeah.
And also another big thing is, again, like the pronoun stuff and doing activities that will talk about the different identities will be good. So like kindergarten, like, yeah, you have boys playing with trucks and girls playing with dolls. You could be like, hey, instead of saying, hey, girls, go play with your toys and boys go hang with where you're gonna hang, be like, everybody find your toys that you want to play with. Don't gender toys. Anybody can play with anything, because toys are not gender at the end of the day. They're toys. So just bring it down to their age level, and their understanding is the big thing when it comes to younger kids.
Absolutely. And one thing which came from Morgan earlier, right, about educating yourself. You know, last year, so my friend who was in the video, Jordan, is a trans woman. and we were doing the introduction. We have Jordan joining us, she's a trans woman, and we worked with her to write the introduction of what it means to be a trans woman. And it was really interesting. One thing that she said that stuck with me, she was like, I was never a boy, and I was like, wow, like I didn't look at it that way before. And so educating yourself by talking to people in the community is that, that firsthand experiences is a great way to go about it. Morgan.
Getting back to organizations and museums, having a non-discrimination policy that includes gender is extremely important, going from that top level, like Ellen was saying. But I also believe that spaces need to be labeled. Your intent needs to be labeled. So labeling the room, or even at some point somewhere in the museum, stating that it is a safe space for everyone and that it is inclusive of everyone, sets the tone for anyone that may feel opposition or may have negative thoughts about this, to understand where the organization stands, so that it's not a surprise to them when quite possibly they're asked to leave, okay? It's something that employees can look to and say, well, here it is. It was here all along. This is a safe space for everyone. So labeling an area, I think, is something that's extremely important. Besides the organization having their own process and having their own rules and regulations that they expect their employees to follow, because basically when you're an employee, you're representing your employer. And that's something that's extremely important, that you know who you hire, how you train them, and for them to also know what the rules and regulations are for your organization.
And to add to that, Morgan, there is in just general signage, you were talking about bathrooms, and obviously this is like what you're saying is like a deliberate signage saying safe space. But right now, because of COVID and all those protocols, there's so much more signage, like about masks, about 6 feet, about this, that. And so just thinking through as an organization, what are the pictures am I using, or the little like clip art things are we using to show keep your distance? What does that family cut out of families look like? What does that one look like? I think that's something to think about, because in everywhere there is so much more signage right now, stuck on floors, doors, walls, everything. So it's definitely something to think about, how you label your space. And also that's a really great thing of just saying all are welcome, in a way that's part of your policy, like right as you enter the building, as you enter the school, your front office, your front desk, here it is. It doesn't have to be the whole mission statement or the, it's got to be something that people go, got it, straight away, right? Excellent. Sorry, Jahara, and if anybody has any quick questions, they are welcome to put them in the chat, but we will be wrapping up very soon. So Jahara.
Okay, so the other point is, it's really important to me that people are authentic and that they live their message 24/7. Don't be Black Lives Matter in February, and don't be Black Lives Matter in 2020, and then not in 2021 and 2022. Right. Don't hashtag the names of our dead trans people or of people in Black communities if this is not what you live, not just in policy, but in action. Don't be LGBT in June and just walk in pride, because we know it and we see it. And I'm gonna tell you something that I think Gabby can even attest to, is that one thing that this pandemic did is gave young people a lot of bravery to be able to say what they mean, when they mean it. I mean, they are talking back, speaking up, and don't be surprised if they will hold you accountable. Online, in person, on your social media threads. And so they will, I know youth who go in and find, and if they find someone who is problematic online on Twitter or on Instagram, or even not Snapchat, what is the TikTok? They
TikTok,
will,
you got it. You're up to date.
right? They will find your employer and make it their business to get you fired. This is not a joke. These more kids are identifying as queer. I'll just say queer for the rainbow, but also include trans than ever. And so if you think that you're only, and you don't know what they look like, because you can't look at me and tell that I'm queer either. You just think that, oh, that's a regular Black woman. You may even think I'm a church-going Black woman. But I'll tell you, I'm, one of the queerest, and I am one of those that'll be in your DMs and I'll be calling your boss and saying, I heard your employee with a name badge on at Publix saying something transphobic. I'd like to know, do you support this? And there are young people who do this. And so I want you to, while we're talking about labeling spaces, I want you to remember, like, what's the label of your heart? If this is not your heart, if this is not who you are, then again, consider, I don't know what kind of business you're going to go into where you're not reaching LGBT people, because we're everywhere, but maybe you don't need to be on the front lines. And consider having those flags that you have out, just doing Pride or just doing, certain months that you're celebrating. Consider having those flags all the time, just because. How about that? How about we love our communities just because, and it's not that month. And think about your signatures too. Have your would you want your employees? One simple thing you could do is add your pronouns to your signature, and that at least lets the people know that are emailing you back and forth that they're thinking about it and that they're okay. Because if you allow their employees to have their signature, to have their pronouns in their signature, now I assume that you're going to be okay if it's not the pronoun that you expected. And so I think that's one way. And before we go, I think I would like to hear from Gabby, and I'm sorry, I could have just texted you this and had you prepare your answer, but I want
On the
you
spot,
to, like,
Gabby.
I'd like for you to let us know, you've been to museums, you love museums, right? What is something that you would like to see in a museum that would make you have felt inclusive if you weren't out, and something where you are out now? Like, what is something that you would like to see happen?
I'd like to see it in like a history museum. I'd like to see the history of LGBTQ history. Like, I'd like to see stuff on the Stonewall riots, on Marsha P. Johnson, on Sylvia, I forgot her last name. I'd like to see stuff like that. And a small thing is the bathroom signs. I'd like to see gender inclusive bathrooms, or just a bathroom for everyone. The male and female signs, I don't see the need for them.
Like Morgan was saying.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gabby, and thank you, Jahara. And I think to touch on, let's not, these specialty months are important, right? They highlight, they spotlight, but as the messaging has to be living and breathing every day and if this is what you do just in June, it's not who you are as an institution, right? The messaging of Black History Month has to be throughout the whole year, not just in February. And same with Pride Month, and like Rainbow Families Month. We don't all call it Rainbow Families Month. It's got to be, if you're doing it and highlighting and spotlighting it for a month, it's got to be because it's part of your ongoing programming and climate, right? For your whole existence as an organization. Shay, I saw your hand up briefly. Did you want to add to anything, and then we will wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to add just a few things. The first really is that in safe spaces or spaces that we're creating that are welcoming and affirming, those spaces are amazing, they're important, but people can still feel restricted, limited, and that they're not safe in those spaces. You know, going into a museum or seeing things that represent you or seeing literature that, you know, represents your community is very important. And I applaud that. I want to see more of it. But that doesn't always equate to folks coming into your space feeling like I can be me, I can be authentic, I can live my truth. That was me for 34 years, at least the adult parts of my life where, you know, I would go to Pride or I would go to different things in the community. So I think that's really important. And some of the institutions and places we all work aren't necessarily ready or equipped, or there's bureaucracy that kind of slows things down. And it's a really big ship to turn around. And so we have to look at what are ways, little things, big things, little wins. Now, can I be a GSA advisor? Can I, you know, hold a training in my classroom during lunch for students who want to learn about being an ally? Those things are really important. I keep thinking about Chad Sanford from Deerfield Beach Middle School, and no person should ever go into a place, a learning institution, anywhere, and experience any kind of violence when there are teachers present, when there are educators present, when there are people there who are meant to keep them safe. And I watched that video and it crushed me because that was everything I feared as a child. That was an awareness from a very young age that I could never be myself, because that meant that I would be subject to physical violence, that I would be subject to harassment and bullying, misunderstanding, and discrimination. And so we have to do better. We have to look at, okay, not just why this happened and how this happened, but how can we work with folks who aren't up to date, who aren't culturally sensitive, who aren't understanding of folks in the community, or who pass judgment or use slurs against our community to demean and belittle people. These are really important things. And if we focus on those that aren't necessarily accepting, or that make jokes, or that who in the past have been aggressive or violent against other people in our community, that's where we can really make big change. That's where we can really change hearts and minds and open understanding to our community and to those that pass judgment just out of fear. Like Morgan said, fear and a lack of respect. And those things are truly important. So as we're thinking about safe spaces, and as we're thinking about how we do that in the community and how we're more inclusive, we have to look at those little things too, because they really add up to making someone's life start to finish, from school to work to where they go to the store to shop, free from that fear, invalidation, and harassment.
And I think it's touching on that, Shay, it's so hard to claim you're a safe space, right? There's no guarantee, especially when there's a population that you can't control. But I think it's about the culture. And also I think from a children's museum perspective, and we do this in every part of our ethos, is modeling, right? We model how parents can engage with their kid while playing and help to develop their fine motor skills, right? It's the same as modeling for everybody else that this is okay. This is like, there's nothing to fear, right? It's just different and it's unique, and it's not my story or your story, but this is this person and their story. And I think definitely as people on the museum floor, right, walking it around, you are modeling for your guests, right, a certain behavior and a certain way to interact and welcome. But again, you can't be like, we're a safe space, because you can try and you can do your best. There's not a guarantee, right, Shay, what you were saying, but as long as we're all trying and fighting the fight, you know, maybe one day we will get there. Morgan, just quickly. You're muted, Morgan, sorry.
Very quickly, what I want to say is for parents and for educators, children are always watching. Be real, educate yourself. don't be a hypocrite. Children watch you and they model your behavior. And they also pick up on small nuances that you think that they're not catching. Yes, they are, okay? So be the person that you want to be for your child, okay? Model the behavior that you want for your child. That's all I have to say.
Sounds so simple, right? It's hard for some, but it sounds so simple. So we're about to wrap up. I do want to thank all our panelists. Ellen had to hop off on another call, so I do thank her. And I thank, just looking at my tiled screen, thank you, Johara. Thank you, Gabby and Juliana, Morgan, and Katie. It is so wonderful to have you all here and hearing your stories. For those of you who joined us, we appreciate your questions and just you actually being here, right? It's so wonderful that you are here. You will receive a list of all the resources that were mentioned in an email, so don't worry about that. And I also, this is one of my biggest takeaways is give presents for Pride. Yes, that is awesome, Gabby. So send somebody who fits in the rainbow that, give them a present for Pride. Why not? That is a great takeaway. I'm going to be asking for some presents, so that's awesome. To wrap us up, Katie has a poem that she has written, that they have written. Apologies, Katie. And I heard this poem first. We worked on a different event recently. So I heard this poem a few months ago, and I thought it was a wonderful way to wrap us up here today. So I'm going to spotlight Katie, and they are going to take us out. Oh, I have to remove everyone else's spotlight. So when you are ready,
Yes.
Katie.
Alrighty, and I'll be reading it from my phone because it is not memorized in any capacity. It is called The American Dream to Me. For me, it means equal rights, like same-sex marriage, because everybody deserves to love who they want without the fear of being killed for it. It's having the right to feel safe in school, like no one should have to worry about being beat up just for being themselves. It's being able to be yourself in public, like two women should not have to worry about what would happen if they were catched kissing each other in a public space. It's knowing that your voice matters in society, like having peace of mind of knowing that your vote counts and just knowing people want input on things that matter to you. It's having workplace protections, like someone shouldn't have to worry about losing their job over the same-sex partner that they have. It's having healthcare for all, like a family who has a low income can still get the healthcare that they need for their family. It's making sure all kids get a good education, like everyone should have the same opportunities even if they can't go to a private school. It's making better pay for teachers because they are the real superheroes of our society. Like a teacher of mine went above and beyond when I lost my mom. Like she came to check on me and make sure I was doing okay. It's knowing Black Lives Matter and that they should be celebrated and not discriminated against. Like young Black people should not be told they are on the school to prison pipeline. It's just knowing that every social economic class matters, no matter gender, gender expression, skin color, intelligence, or financial bracket you're in, you matter. This is what the American dream means to me.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you to everybody. We just appreciate everybody's presence here today, and to the panel for your insights and your expertise, your lived experiences, your organization experiences. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Happy Pride. And you can check out, if you head to Miami Children's Museum's website, you can check out all our different events we're having within the museum, and also our virtual videos and activities, all to do with Rainbow Families Month. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.